Welcome everybody to the 2022 Weather Ready Nation Ambassador Roundtable. We welcome all of you and hope we're going to have a great hour and a half conversation on various topics. We have a great list of speakers. I'm going to pull up the presentation here. All right. So a few logistics. First of all, we really encourage questions and comments. This is, as the name implies, a roundtable. And so you're going to be able to use the question and answer function in this GoToWebinar. So take advantage of that. If there are questions directly related to speakers, we can address questions after each speaker, or we'll have plenty of time at the very end for open discussion to address questions and comments. So again, please take advantage of that feature. For our agenda today, and by the way, this is being recorded, so hopefully everyone is good with that, and we will make this recording available on the website so you can share with your colleagues as well. So I have a few slides. My name is Doug Hildebrand. I am the Weather Ready Nation Ambassador Program Lead, and it's always exciting every year to engage with our ambassadors across the country. This is our second year that we are holding this virtually. Typically, before the pandemic, we would meet in person at the American Meteorological Society's annual meeting, and the last one was held in Boston in January of 2020. And each year we really try to target some areas of opportunity, some best practices and lessons learned, and really try to galvanize our ambassadors to, do more with their local and their, other ambassadors, but their local forecast offices within Noaa and the National Weather Service, and really, those best practices can be shared across the country. And of course, encouraging other organizations to become a Weather Ready Nation ambassador. In a little bit, I'll pass the microphone off to our acting National Weather Service Director, Mary Erickson. And then we'll be hearing about the efforts within the National Weather Service on service equity and evolving the role of ambassadors. And then we have two special guests from ambassadors themselves. Val Sanders, the president of Weather Call Services, and Dr. Carlos Martinez from the National Center for Atmospheric Research. He is a postdoc, but he is also engaged with the American Meteorological Society and has led an effort to engage faith-based organizations and meteorologists, and we'll hear more about his presentation. And then, of course, we'll have some time for open discussion. So a few Weather Ready Nation headlines. I'm very excited to be able to announce, just recently we surpassed 12,000 organizations. The Weather Ready Nation Ambassador Program launched in January of 2014, so we just surpassed 8 years. And it continues to grow and do wonderful things in building a Weather Ready Nation and building ready, responsive, and resilient communities. And one of those successes we just had earlier this month, which was Safe Place Selfie Day, which is a social media campaign where we encourage all Americans to know what hazards are in their area, identify where your safe place is to those hazards, and then in a fun and creative way, take a selfie and then post it on social media. And as you can see with our metrics there, we reached over 34 million Twitter accounts and tweet views surpassing 200 million. That was our 6th year of doing it, and it'll continue next year as well. And then I wanted to highlight 4 opportunities coming up in the next couple of months with Hurricane Preparedness Week, heat safety. Our traditional summer weather safety campaign will launch on June 1st, the first day of meteorological summer. And then we have a special campaign that we're launching on the first day of astronomical summer, and that's really tying all of our preparedness and safety content in the theme of the great outdoors. When you're on your boat or you're hiking, you got to take extra precautions, and so we'll be launching that in 2 weeks here, or 2 months, excuse me. So continuing with our Weather A Nation headlines, it really has been an incredible couple of years during the pandemic. We continue to, push the envelope on weather safety and engaging various ambassadors and organizations that are vulnerable to weather. And here are just 2 success stories over the last 2 years where you've seen a precipitous drop in fatalities. The National Weather Service mission is to save lives and property. And so you can see here, in fact, this past year, we had a record low number of fatalities from lightning strikes. And even in the pediatric heat fatalities in vehicles, those numbers have decreased by 50% the past 2 years over previous years. And so, one thing you may say is, well, what impact do the ambassadors have, or the campaigns in general in Weather Ready Nation era? And it's always hard to correlate directly to our efforts and our ambassadors' efforts to these results. But one thing we can say is that we're seeing the results that we want to see. We want to see that downward trend, and we're looking forward to continuing that in 2022 and 2023 and beyond. We want to get that down, to 0. As you can see, here we are in April, and neither lightning nor hot vehicles, we have seen any deaths so far. So let's continue with that good news. So I want to pass it on to our Acting National Weather Service Director, Mary Erickson, who has a few remarks to give. Mary.
Okay, can you hear me and see me? Oh, good. Okay, thanks. It's great to be with everyone today, and still being a little bit in the virtual space. Looking forward to a time when we'll be able to all meet together and have some of that more robust dialogue directly together. So, one of the things I wanted to remind folks of is when I became the acting director back in January, I sent out an email. I hope most of you received that message. It was out to all of our partners, talking about a few things that we wanted to work on at the Weather Service, and where we particularly thought partnership engagement would be helpful. So Doug's already mentioned a few of those. One of them is about ensuring equity and decision support and service delivery. So I'm really pleased that Dr. Steve Smith is going to be talking with you about that today. Another is specifically about our partnering strategy. And of course, Weather Ready Nation ambassadors are a component of that strategy. We're always looking for better ways to work with you to meet in advance and deliver on our mission. One of the things we are also engaged in here at the Weather Service this year is really looking at ourselves and saying, how well are we doing in terms of customer experience, and assessing how we can improve those things, particularly when it comes to engaging with the Weather, Water, Climate enterprise, and also on delivering those services, particularly in an equitable way, as Doug mentioned. A third thing that we mentioned there in those priorities is looking forward to how we can continue to refine and upgrade our work in the area of climate services. So I just want to touch a little bit on a few of these things. Certainly the events across the country over the past year and since the last time we met, we've made incredible progress towards building a weather ready nation, but we certainly still have several challenges. There's been just the increase in the number of billion-dollar disasters and major events is accelerating. We're seeing that all across the country. And at the same time, we are seeing some progress in areas, as Doug mentioned, with the lightning deaths and with some of the heat health, also in tornadoes hitting populated areas when there's really good warning in that TikTok 2-3 days in advance, as well as in the hours before an event, particularly for daytimes events. We've seen many fewer fatalities and really good community preparedness, such as the New Orleans tornadoes. So there's some improvement and there's great progress, but there's also, of course, always a lot more work to do. And we're going to be relying more than ever on our collaboration with you at the Weather, Water, and Climate Enterprise to help. And the big thing is making sure that folks can prepare and understand the threats that they face. And there's going to be a lot of opportunity there. One of the things is making sure we continue to refine messaging, understand where the messaging is not penetrating to those who need to take action, to those who are most vulnerable, and think about new and innovative ways that we can get those messages across. So, today you'll hear a little bit about how Weather Service is working particularly on this area of reaching historically underserved communities in a more consistent and effective manner. We've had a number of different efforts over the years in terms of reaching communities that speak different languages, working with tribal communities, working with folks that may have hearing or seeing impairments, but they haven't been intentional and consistent across the board for us. And that's a self-assessment that we've had, and we know we need to improve our game there. The other thing is that, we've focused in our work on decision support, we've focused on the decision makers and not necessarily always penetrating into the communities that are those that are most vulnerable, and particularly understanding what some of those vulnerabilities are and how those persist. We know with some of the different challenges, be they drought, be they heat, these things are piggybacking on top of each other, and a community may not have the resources not only just to rebound from a severe and extreme event, but also then to be better prepared for the next one. So how can we play a role in addressing some of these challenges? There's a number of things that we're doing with education and outreach, as Doug was just mentioning. These communication campaigns can really help engage much broader, and we're just so thankful for all of the hard work that you're doing. I wanted to also mention that as we talk about being ready, responsive, and resilient as a part of building the weather ready nation, it naturally leads to supporting a nation that's also resilient and able to thrive with a backdrop of a changing climate, and to understand how those changes and ripple effects are impacting events on the weather timescale. And so climate related issues are things that Noaa is seeking to address. You'll hear Noaa more and more speaking about building a climate ready nation. It's a natural extension, as I said, of the hard work we've all done as a weather ready nation, and making sure that folks can continue to benefit from and depend on that shared understanding and collective action on climate change. So we think this is directly aligned with the work we've been doing with you on Weather Ready Nation ambassadors. It's a natural evolution. And so something I'm just teeing up for you all, for us to be thinking about, where's that intersection between the extreme events in the weather scale with the climate ready related, backdrop, that changing backdrop that's informing things such as extreme heat and drought, sea level rise, other types of things that are impacting our communities. So we're looking to make sure that we've got clear and authoritative climate information as well as the weather information. One of the things I would also mention here is we do believe that as we move forward in these areas across Noaa, that it's going to be stimulating that public-private climate enterprise. There's a lot of space here for all of us to be working together. We know that there are challenges and decisions that the private sector needs to make, where they're looking for help in understanding all of the data and predictions that we're putting out. So one of the things on the community level that I wanted to mention, we've been doing a series of roundtables, both on climate extremes, but also with industry partners. And communities at that level, they've been telling us that having access to and understanding weather and climate information at the local scale, what's an extreme temperature in my community? How much precip have we gotten over the years? What does a heavy or extreme precip amount look like for us? And how well does our infrastructure at our community handle it? Those are the kinds of things that we need to ensure that we're delivering that information and have it available in a understandable way. So, we're going to be looking at some of these key climate impacts and these data, and then how to communicate the information and make the data more accessible. So I see a few big opportunities as a growth for the Weather Ready Nation ambassadors. You're continuing to act as force multipliers for us, particularly in this social equity lens. I'm looking forward to hearing what you think about that after Steve Smith speaks. Also, some specific sector related engagement that we might be able to do along the areas of health, heat health in particular. Some of the impacts to marine and aviation are already underway. Heat health, drought, and flooding are some of the key ones that we're focused on. And then also looking forward to the discussion and hearing from Val on engaging our emerging user groups. That's going to be very exciting. And then also from Carlos on highlighting some of the engagements with houses of worship. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. I'll stand by and be listening in. And really appreciate, again, so appreciate all of the ambassadors that have been working with us over the years, and look forward to what we'll be able to do together in the future. Back to you, Doug.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you very much. And we're going to pass it on to Dr. Steve Smith, who's the director of the Science and Technology Integration Office, and he's also the lead of the National Weather Service Equity Assessment Team. And there have been comments in the chat, and I'll take responsibility of not being able to put the closed captions on this, but I will say that as part of our recording that we will have closed captions added to this recording when it comes out. So Steve, please take it on from now, and I'll move it to your slide here.
Thanks, Doug, and thanks, Mary, for the really excellent opening remarks. It sets the stage for what I'm about to talk about, which is what we're calling service equity, or more descriptively, equitable services for a weather-ready nation. So last year we did an assessment of the Weather Service in terms of our ability to provide services to all communities, and out of that has emerged this new initiative. The cartoon in the center really sets the stage for what I'm going to talk about. On the left-hand side, what we have, the apples in the tree represent the forecast, warnings, watches that the Weather Service provides valuable weather information. And the stick figures represent the communities that we serve and that you all are helping as ambassadors to make use of this information so that people take protective action in the face of hazardous weather and remove themselves from harm's way. But historically, we've sort of provided our services in a kind of one size, if you will, framing, which means that unfortunately not everyone can take advantage. They either aren't aware of the services we provide or are not able to interpret them, and therefore don't take protective action. So that leads to unequal outcomes. So in an equitable services framing, on the right-hand side, we, the Weather Service, working with our partners like yourselves, explicitly account for the unique nature of every community that we serve, and their intrinsic vulnerabilities, so that we adjust our services, if you will, and adapt them to the specific needs of every community, which means in the end building our weather-ready nation one community at a time. And so this is a deliberate attempt now, a strategic shift for the National Weather Service to go about this business, to really take the weather-ready nation vision into every single community that we serve. And the good news is, with partnering with you, we cover from sea to shining sea, Alaska, the Pacific region, and Puerto Rico and elsewhere. So we're already in place. We just need to adjust our strategy and with this new framing. Next slide, please. So one of the ways we're intending to do this is to take our existing programs and mold them into what we're calling a whole community engagement model to develop weather-ready communities. So if you look at the people we serve in communities across the country, of course, the Weather Service is there. We have offices in virtually every state. And we've been working for the last 6 or 7 years now to develop our IDSS, our impact-based decision support services, which focuses mainly on working what we call core partners, emergency management, other governmental partners, water resource managers, to help them make better decisions which impact everyone's lives, hopefully to the better. So, but in addition to that, if you look down one level into the community, we have a whole group we're calling general partners, community organizations, schools, universities, businesses, houses of worship. And these folks can be force multipliers, extend our reach into vulnerable communities, provide us access that we can't ordinarily obtain without their help. And then lastly, we have the individuals, the full spectrum of demographics who are also in the community, basically, that we're hoping to improve outcomes for. So if you look at this holistically, we have our programs that you are probably familiar with, or maybe familiar with, the Storm Ready program. We're looking to broaden that scope to be more of a weather ready program where communities can best help support and use our products for a whole range of weather hazards, including extreme heat, extreme cold, winter weather, floods, etc. And then there are you all, the Weather Ready Nation Ambassador Program, and you're positioned at this sweet spot, I'll call it, that with proper focus, we'd really love for you to consider what it might be to help unlock and act as force multipliers into our most vulnerable communities, because that's where we believe we can move the needle and save more lives if we are better focused on helping these unique communities to, despite their vulnerabilities, to be best prepared to react and respond and recover from hazardous weather. And then lastly, our citizen science and safety outreach. We want to build that out and extend things like skywarn spotters, etc., to help carry out our mission. So we're really taking our existing programs and bringing them together, hopefully singing along with you in advancing, making every community basically weather ready. Next slide. So a foundational piece of this is the new context of social vulnerability. So this map here is of every county in the continental United States, and their designation by the Social Vulnerability Index, which is actually produced by the CDC. And so the dark blue counties are the highest vulnerability ones, and the lighter colors are the less. And so what you can see is that there's a lot of variety in terms of vulnerability across the nation, and how folks are best able to respond to hazardous weather and other threats that may affect them. So let's unpack this briefly. Next slide, Doug. So an important, this social vulnerability is really 15 different variables. It looks at things like socioeconomic status, household composition, race, ethnicity and language, housing and transportation. So a point is that every community has sort of a unique combination of social vulnerability. So you can have different communities that are highly vulnerable for different reasons. And part of our mission going forward is to unpack all of this and understand and be able to target our education and outreach, and hopefully our IDSS, to provide unique services both before and after severe weather, and during it, of course, that again improves outcomes, and so that everyone, no matter what their situation, basically is able to remove themselves from harm's way. So we will love to work with you all to be more targeted and deliberate and intentional across the country, because we can't do it all. That's the whole basis for Weather Ready Nation Ambassadors. We need you all to embrace this mission that we're sharing with you and the emergency managers in the communities that we both serve, to move the needle. We know, as Doug alluded to, You know, we're always trying to improve the accuracy and timeliness of our forecasts and warnings, but just getting people to better understand how they can make the use of the information we already have in and of itself will save lives. And so that's what we're looking for you all to champion, that part of our mission going forward, so that together we can improve everyone's outcome. Next slide, Doug. So an example of this, just to give you back on March 22nd, not that long ago, an EF3 tornado, part of a large tornadic outbreak, struck the city of New Orleans, and in particular devastated the neighborhood of New Orleans called Arabi, which is right next to the historic 9th Ward. So you can see that encircled in red. And what's interesting about this image is that when you look in detail at any given urban community in the country, you will see this huge variety in terms of vulnerability, where some neighborhoods are that are highly vulnerable are side by side with those that are less vulnerable. So sort of putting on our prescription glasses, we can now see these intrinsic vulnerabilities and start to think, well, hey, maybe we should be giving our education and outreach in different ways in specific communities, because they have particular needs that other communities don't. And maybe when we're looking for partners, we should be seeking out partners and New Weather Ready Nation ambassadors that can help us in this mission in particular neighborhoods in given cities. So this is a marathon effort, not a sprint. And we hope to engage you as we go forward and how you can help us with this really compelling new part of our mission to save lives in another way. So thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Steve, very much. And we will pass the microphone on to Val Sanders. Steve, if you want to hang out for the Q&A, and you can even, if there are any questions on service equity, you could even answer on the chat function, the question and answer function. So Val, you've been what I like to term Uber ambassador with your efforts with the Manufactured Housing Institute and the issues on tornado safety, and then most recently with the RV community. And would love for you to give sort of your experience in engaging people and organizations that really have very little connection with the weather enterprise, however, are very weather sensitive. So welcome, Val. Can't hear you. And it may be your headset. So you may want to unplug the headset. Still nothing. But unplug your headset from the computer. All right, well, Val, let's work on your end. Let's see what we can do on your audio, but we'll switch the agenda. Carlos, are you able to jump in here?
Yes, I am.
We hear you loud and clear. Hopefully we'll be able to get Val back online. Take it away. Oh, we got you now. All right.
Okay, Carlos, go ahead. You go.
No, that's fine. You go. Don't worry.
Okay. Sorry about that. I think I was muted on the other end, not this end. I'll try and blaze through this in the interest of limited time. Weather Ready Nation. I believe if you look in the record, Weather Ready Nation Ambassador License number 1, I believe, was awarded to Midland. And I believe number 2 was awarded to Weather Call. Way back in, what year was that? 2016? I don't know. So we've been at this for a long time. It got my attention immediately because I see it as a force multiplier and something that we can use to try and leverage how we interact with clients and to try and develop large scale weather risk management programs. So let's move ahead here. Next slide. You're doing the slides. Okay. So who are we? We got started in 2007. We're degreed meteorologists, telecommunication experts, risk managers, and very experienced RVers. Keep going. Let's blaze on through here. We were the first company to take storm-based warnings and actually create a consumer-facing, publicly available product for it. So we've been at this. I've been told I need to get a life. All I do is look at polygons. We have delivered tens of millions of phone calls and 4 times that in emails and texts since we got started when storm-based warnings came to be. Keep going. So we got started as a consumer-facing product. And when the digital explosion took over and free apps came to be, we found ourselves competing against free. Can't do that. So we moved all of our time and attention into enterprise class solutions. And over the course of time, there were the first industry that really raised itself to get my attention was manufactured housing, grossly underserved market. And yet explosive growth markets. So we reached out to them, whether they wanted it or not, and spent a lot of time and effort introducing ourselves to their industry. Hey, yeah, we're the meteorologists and we are here to help you. We are not here to criticize you or pile on or call you tornado magnets. So we did our homework and we came up with some startling conclusions that I've been trying to share with the Weather Service, especially when it comes to storm damage surveys. The fact that we went and toured a manufactured housing factory and we took Tim Marshall with us, and most people know who he is. He's the preeminent expert in the world on high wind events and structure failure. And we took him and toured 2 manufactured housing factories with an engineer from their side. So they were talking engineer to engineer and spent a day with that. And Tim came away saying the boxes are strong. As a matter of fact, the boxes are probably stronger than site-built homes that go up with absolutely no oversight whatsoever. We spent the day watching Tim Marshall photograph, measuring the length of screws, and he came away saying, my God, the boxes are strong. However, if they are not installed and anchored properly, and the anchoring is maintained on a regular basis, just like you would maintaining a water heater in your house, they're going to fail. And so we got them to realize we recognize what the HUD code and the HUD standard did. And I wish the HUD standard was available on every single site-built home out there because it works. And if you've seen in the past few years, particularly, we always look for this, whenever there's hurricane damage along the coast, if you pay attention now to the manufactured homes, they are failing the same way site-built homes fail, which is from the roof down, not the foundation up. And so we learned a lot about that. We've tried to convey to the Weather Service when you're out doing a storm survey and you come across a mobile home. First, there hasn't been a mobile home built since 1976 in this country, but that's another topic. If you come across one of these things, rather than just a generic mobile home checkbox, look for If the wheels are on, the axles are on, and the towing tongue is there, it was not installed correctly, period. That's all you need to know. It doesn't matter the vintage of it, whether it's a HUD tag or not. If it's not installed correctly, it's not installed correctly, and it's going to fail. So these are the lessons that we've learned. We have created a community-based product called Hazard Call for Communities, which we employ the IBW tags in the warnings that we send out. So we try and make our warnings better than my competitors' warnings, and they are. We took this, made the warnings, drilled down to them deeper using the IBW tags and some other things coming out of SPC to try and get people that live in manufactured housing communities think in terms of a ready, set, go mentality, that severe weather never sneaks up on you. Here are the hints and clues that we're proactively pushing to you, actionable items in plain language that they can understand. And we're only in about 60 communities that are engaging this service whole scale, but the 60 that use it love it. They feel so much safer and less vulnerable to severe weather than they did before. And that's the whole key to it. We need more engagement from their industry. They now are having to recognize what we're saying works, because the communities who are engaged in an organized weather risk management program are getting better quality information, and their residents feel safer living in that community. And one of the other things that was really key when we put this together was we don't allow the residents in a manufactured housing community to opt in. No. Everybody gets put on the hazard call community system in this community. If you don't want to get the storm warnings, fine, but you have to come to the office, sign a form, and opt out. And there's real power behind that, and hopefully we can build on that at a later date. The second very high, what's considered to be a vulnerable community, go back up one. Well, RV and camping. Now we can go on to the next one. Sorry about that. I'm getting ahead of myself. There is, whether you are aware of it or not, explosive growth that's going on in the RV industry. Explosive growth. People are abandoning their homes, buying beautiful travel trailers and motor homes, and they're hitting the road. And that's great. Except, as meteorologists, we're all sitting here shaking in our shoes, because as this explosive growth happens in this market, it is inevitable that tornado fatalities are going to go up, because there's simply hundreds of thousands more people out there living in things that are not attached to the ground. And so, as meteorologists, from my perspective, I take this personally. If the tornado fatalities go up, it's going to be the meteorologists who end up looking like the guys wearing the dunce caps. And that's not right. The warnings and the science behind detection continue to get better. But we've got this gigantic growth in the population over here who are living in new modalities that are extremely vulnerable. And so we've been working very hard with this community, and I will share with you a conversation just to show you how bad it is, the misunderstanding that people have. This is how bad it is. I had the opportunity to have a conversation with the CEO of Thor Industries. And for those of you not familiar, Thor is like the big 600-pound gorilla. And underneath that are Airstream and Keystone and all the big names in the RVs. I had a chance to talk with the CEO And I introduced him, he's like, weather, you're a meteorologist, what are you doing here? And that's always the initial response. What are you doing here? And you look at them going, you live in something that's not attached to the ground. That's why I'm here. So in this conversation, an initial introduction, he said to me, I understand everything you're saying, Valerie, it all makes sense, but I will tell you this. I personally live in the biggest, heaviest, baddest, most state-of-the-art motor coach on the planet. And I actually feel pretty safe in my motor coach. And I just kind of looked at him and said, here's my card, he gave me his, and he asked me to please follow up. The week after that conversation were the Kentucky tornado events. And I hadn't heard back from him as he promised, because I followed up with him and he didn't respond to my email. So I, looking at that carnage, and I got thinking about that conversation, and frankly, it pissed me off. I sent him an email and said, Bob, I understand if you remember the conversation that you feel safe in your rig. I hope the imagery that you've been seeing this past week has caused you to rethink that conversation. And within a half an hour, he had his number one guy reaching out to me via an email. Valerie, we need to start talking about this. You're right. Oh my gosh. So we're starting to crack into it and raise their awareness. The difference between the manufactured housing folks and the RV folks is the manufactured housing folks still function under a false sense of security that their houses are safer than they are. And as long as they're anchored correctly, that is correct. On the RV side of it, they recognize that they're super vulnerable. They, honest to God, don't even know where to start to change it. And then the other thing that's going on that's extremely dangerous in that space is the false sense of security that these things provide to people that are out underway. So,
Hey, Val.
yes.
I don't know if there's a background noise or something, but we're getting a very squeaky. Is that your chair, maybe?
I don't know. If I can plug back in and not mute myself, which seems to be. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Does that?
It might be a computer. Yeah.
Does this improve it?
Yeah, that might have improved a little bit. So anyways,
Okay.
let's.
All right. So I'm trying
There
to
you go.
move it right along. As we've been developing these verticals and trying to develop intelligent solutions that better meet the needs, the unique needs that they have, I keep hunting for, I want to wrap a weather ready nation bow around these big projects because it makes sense. It's a force multiplier. And so what I'm looking for is how can a weather ready nation initiative be crafted so that we've got something tangible. It's not just a list. We need something tangible. If we get the Recreational Vehicle Association to buy into weather safety wholesale, I keep envisioning an Uber Weather Ready Nation project to be able to say to them, yes, if you do this, we'll do this. And we need to be able to have tangible incentives and motivation to bring to these industries to say, yeah, if you make your communities safer, we're going to deliver some sort of an awareness, a PR campaign, a do good, pat on the back with some visibility so that there is something, a takeaway for them. And it's going to take bold thinking, it's going to take hard work. But what I encourage you, and I don't know how, I can't see that, I haven't figured that out, Mark, yet. I'm not that smart. I haven't seen the list of everybody that's on this call, but I encourage anybody that is in the private sector to think in terms of, if you've got a major project, can you wrap it into a Weather Ready Nation project, a big project that can gain some national coverage, so that we're bringing something more tangible to these types of users that never heard of us before, never thought about weather safety before. Now they are. Now we've sort of we've whetted their appetite. Now we need to keep feeding good stuff to them to motivate them to keep doing the right thing. So is that the last slide, Doug? Who's moving along
Yes,
here?
thank you.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Val. The audio is much better with your
I am
head.
so sorry. So do you want to do questions now, or do you want to do them at the very end?
Yeah, I think we'll get through Carlos's talk, and then we'll return to some of the we do have a few really good questions here that we want to address.
Okay.
Again, for everybody.
I will mute myself.
Great. And then you can actually go off of camera to just ease the system a bit. But Carlos, take it from here. And this is a really exciting opportunity to engage the faith-based community.
Great, thank you, and thanks for inviting me for this awesome roundtable today. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, wherever you are. My name is Carlos Martinez. I'm a postdoc at the National Center for Atmospheric Research, and part of my work has been on really bridge building between communities of faith and spiritualities and the Weather, Water, Climate enterprise. So next slide, please. Okay, so I chair the Committee on Spirituality, Multi-Faith Outreach and Science, or COSMOS. This is under the Board on Representation, Accessibility, Inclusion, and Diversity at the American Meteorological Society. So about a year and a half ago or so, in conversing with folks throughout the years at various professional societies, I saw that there really is a need to foster a formalized space with professionals and scientists who are spiritual or faith-based to share ideas, converse, have dialogue on topics that we all share, which is on being a good steward of the environment, or topics related to environmentalism. In addition to that, there are numerous amazing multi-faith organizations like Green Faith, Interfaith Power and Light that do awesome work on environmental justice, climate action, etc. But there isn't this bridge or this relationship between these organizations and the American Meteorological Society or the enterprise in and of itself. And when we think of Weather Ready Nation, when we think of this incredible initiative, communities of faith, spiritual communities are important in this banner, in building a Weather Ready Nation. Next slide, please. And so one example of this, of some of the initiatives that Cosmos is doing, we developed a webinar series called Finding Common Ground on Science, Environmentalism, and Spirituality. And we had a very successful first webinar back in February, and our second webinar, which is on the official start of the Atlantic hurricane season on June 1st, will be on collaboration opportunities between the American Meteorological Society and spiritual and faith-based organizations to build a weather-ready nation. So oftentimes we know that spiritual and houses of worship are places of safety, volunteerism, and crisis management during and after a high-impact weather or climate event. A notable example is during Hurricane Katrina, how many folks, heeded the advice from their spiritual or worship leader more so than the National Weather Service to evacuate. Or even here locally, I live here in Boulder County, we've experienced many wildfires already. And I know of numerous houses of worship that offered their space for people who lost their homes to have a place for shelter, food, safety, etc. And so this webinar on June 1st, it's an exciting opportunity to really have this dialogue that perhaps may not have been, talked about within the enterprise, which is on how we can work together, the spiritual and faith-based communities in the enterprise, to build a weather-ready nation together in a respectful and a reciprocal manner. I'm acknowledging that, many spiritualities have differences, but when it comes to environmentalism, we all share common goals in seeking community resiliency when it comes to, for example, natural disasters and high impact weather events. So this is going to be an exciting event. We'll have the president of Interfaith Power and Light, Reverend Susan Hendershot there, as well as the director, Marcus T. Coleman Jr., the director of the Department of Homeland Security Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, as well as Doug and myself and Bruce Jones from Midland Radio, to have this really important conversation. Next slide, please. And so other initiatives that Cosmos will be doing for the AMS that may be of interest for any of you, we'll have several spiritual and faith-based environmentalism sessions for the upcoming annual meeting in Denver, Colorado, and hopefully this will continue on in subsequent annual meetings at the AMS. One will be with the Weather Ready Nation Symposium, which will be on the intersection of spiritual and faith-based communities and building a weather-ready nation, and also a joint session with several symposiums, the Weather, Water, Climate Enterprise, Societal Applications, and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Symposiums on research initiatives and partnerships between the enterprise and spiritual faith-based communities and organizations. So this is a really awesome opportunity for any of you. For example, if you've done research with or initiatives with spiritual and faith-based communities, whether that's various faith traditions, indigenous spiritualities, basically any group that is spiritual and or faith-based. We welcome abstracts, proposals for these sessions that speak on risk communication, for example, initiatives on community resiliency from high impact weather events, or communication of climate change or other high impact weather issues to spiritual and faith-based communities. This is a place to have a platform to share that research, to share those initiatives. And that's one of the objectives of Cosmos, is to really open this really important dialogue that perhaps hasn't been communicated before, and acknowledging that, again, this initiative to build a weather-ready nation, it's going to include communities of faith and spiritualities, given their importance to society. So next slide. So I'll just stop there. Happy to hear any questions or comments that you may have. If you're interested in the committee, we have members of all spiritualities and faiths, which is really exciting. We love to hear ideas related to anything on environmentalism and any of the initiatives that we are working on. Feel free to contact or email me for more information. And I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carlos. And that sort of wraps up our cadre of speakers, and we're transitioning into the open discussion. So again, if you have a question or comment, please use the Q&A function there in the GoToMeeting software. We did have a question that I think several of us could share their perspective, but one question is, could community be a language, culture, or religious group? And I'll give Steve, you want to take a first crack at that, and then maybe Carlos, Val, and myself could jump in there as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and one we have to grapple with. So community can be a group of people living in a particular area, contiguous area, right? But within every community, there are sub-communities. You could say demographic crosscuts. You have elderly population, hard of hearing, Spanish speaking, multilingual, religious groups, etc. So the answer to the question is yes. And I think in the whole community approach, we need to take into account all of these flavors of sub-communities, etc. when we're talking about engaging them and hopefully raising their level of awareness and preparedness. to hazardous weather. So a definite yes to that. The limitations of the Weather Service is in the sense of addressing this is that we have some demographics that cut across all communities, but every community is sort of mapped out into our organizational responsibility based on our forecast offices, et cetera. So great question. Thank you.
Carlos or Val? Anything to add or?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with what was just said. With Cosmos, we work with a variety of spiritual and faith-based identities, many of whom can be of underrepresented groups. When we think of, indigenous communities, spirituality is embedded in their knowledge systems. When we think of Hispanic, Latinx, African American communities as well, they can be of communities of faith. And so it's this integration of working with these really important identities and seeing areas that perhaps weren't discussed or weren't worked on to establish those connections in places of common ground, in places that are of a, again, respectful manner to their cultures, to their way of life. That can serve both the enterprise and these communities.
Yep, Val?
I want to throw one comment in there, and I would caution everybody because I think when we talk about underserved communities, I think that we naturally tend to lean in the direction of lower income, socioeconomically depressed, and having worked now, especially in the RV space, that's made me rethink that. Is someone who just spent $500,000 on a motor coach part of an underserved community? And if you'd asked me that question a year ago, I would have said, that's ridiculous, that's crazy. No, absolutely not. Well, they absolutely are, because they're driving down the highway at 70 miles an hour, believing their smartphone is going to save them and keep them safe. And that is not the case. And so, yes, they are an underserved community. They don't even realize it yet. And so there's a big education curve that we are taking on right now to explain Weather 101 to these folks and explain to them why you need a commercial grade service to really keep you safe. And here's why. And once you go through that and show them why, it all makes perfect sense. But until you get them up to the table and you can get that opportunity to educate them about how things work in the weather world, they don't get it. They absolutely don't get it. And it's always a big eye opener when you do introduce the reality of how stuff works. So that's my suggestion, is be careful how you define an underserved community, because there may be some out there that would really startle you.
Good points, everybody. So thank you. Just getting to a couple of questions here. And one's particularly interesting on my point, because I showed the graphics of, record low lightning over the last 2 years and very noticeable drop on the pediatric vehicle deaths and the impact of the pandemic. And, it's interesting, and maybe some future research will tackle the impact of the pandemic on weather hazards. But, on the lightning side, for the past year or two, one of the actions that was encouraged during the pandemic was to get outside, right? So you would think if there were more people, recreating and getting outside, not as many people in restaurants and gyms and whatnot, that you would see a trend toward more lightning deaths, and we haven't seen it. And though I agree, with the sort of the early stages with the lockdowns, that, kids weren't going to daycare or preschool, you know, there wasn't a whole lot of commuting in general, that would be an interesting reason why pediatric heat, you know, in vehicles decreased. But, you know, even this past year, you know, a lot more, you know, daycares are opening up. It'll be interesting as we go sort of into this post-pandemic phase. Does that, you know, does the uptick reappear as we sort of get back to some sense of normal? But it is an interesting factor as to, you know, how much it played a part. And then there was another question on, you know, an uptick. Someone who travels a lot is seeing an uptick of those who are unhoused, and I'm assuming that's, you know, the homeless populations. And I'll say, you know, there was a specific study done in the Milwaukee area where they're looking at, you know, what needs, or how do we connect, and how do we address that, you know, specialized needs when it comes to weather safety, you know, whether it's the extreme cold, the extreme heat, you know, a severe weather event. But it's another example of, you know, we need to be more intentional on addressing those who are most vulnerable. You know, I'm you know, Val highlighted her efforts with the manufactured housing issue, mobile homes. We're even finding that the trend today, it's not even a low income issue. It's people who want to downsize, who want to not have as much of an environmental footprint, will have a smaller home, a green home, oftentimes not equating to a structure you want to be in during a severe weather and a tornado event. And so, you know, how do we address those, you know, those issues, you know, where, you know, the National Weather Service, we have our, you know, our lead time, that is our metric in giving people advance notice. But is it enough? Is 15 minutes enough to get out of your home, drive to a public shelter? Or do we need to look at the science? And this is where the service equity is it's not just partnerships and engaging with other organizations, but how can the science advance to where we can give that sort of warn on forecast paradigm where it's 30 or 45 minutes that you need to take that action, right? So, you know,
Doug, if I could throw in a quick comment here on that. One of the things that we've looked at in the recreational vehicle piece of what we're doing is, can we change the narrative to they're in an RV, they're in a campground, they're as high a vulnerability as it gets, okay? Can we change the narrative to, well, what if we start dripping information on you the day before or several hours in advance, like send them that SPC convective outlook with a great big red blob and you're in the middle of that bullseye. If you're in a recreational vehicle, you can do something that the guy in the site-built home can't do. You can leave. You can pick up and get the hell out of the way of the danger as long as you've got enough advance notice. You can actually take control of that. And no one has ever discussed anything like that in this space. So again, ready, set, go. Threats in motion. We're trying to ramp up our messaging as the threat goes up accordingly, and looking at what we have to deal with on the user end. So that's just one of many conversations that are going on that we're having in that space. And fortunately, they're starting to listen. So that's exciting.
That is exciting. Listening's the first step. You know, getting back to the questions, you know, there are a couple of questions here sort of on our National Weather Service products and services. If you have entered those questions, very specific, whether it's radar, there's one on the Storm Prediction Center. If you could do me a favor and email that question to wrn.feedback@noaa.gov, we'll have more time to get that to our subject matter experts and get you the answer to your questions and whatnot. This roundtable isn't necessarily trying to dissect, the operational products that we have, but we certainly value your input and can get that to the right place. So again, wrn.feedback@noaa.gov. There was more of a comment than a question on how your organization became an ambassador, and then you have a sort of a monitor that shows the weather story in the lobby, and that's a great, very kind of simple way for an ambassador to serve as an example by engaging your employees, engaging customers or people who are entering your building, and just being aware what's going on for today. And whether it's the National Weather Service weather story, whether it's a commercial source of information, what we want people to be is plugged in. Mary in her remarks mentioned the tornado events over the past few weeks and months, and the success of our Storm Prediction Center in socializing these notable severe weather events days and days in advance, and that's incredibly important going into a severe weather day, to have that socialization in multiple days. And the best example I can give is if you go into a building and there's a fire alarm, right? You may think, oh, that's probably a false alarm. I don't really need to take action. But if you walk into that building and there's construction and someone's welding something and there's sparks, and then a few moments later the fire alarm goes off, you're more likely to make that connection and take action, saying, you know what, it could have been that construction. That's sort of what that SPC, 2, 3, 4 days in advance, it's giving you that idea in your mind that you can prepare, set your family calendar, to be prepared for that day well in advance. You don't have to wait for the watch or the warning to make some of these critical decisions. Yeah, thumbs up, Val, very good. All right, Rich, can you jump in, or Steve, are there any other questions that we want to address?
Yeah, let me read one for you, Doug. Hold on. How about the question about can ambassadors reach out to their local houses of worship and other groups and try to recruit them as Weather Ready Nation ambassadors?
A wholeheartedly yes, absolutely. Again, if you look from a very high level of what we're trying to do with our ambassador program is, bring together organizations that have that shared goal of preparedness, of resilience, of the importance that your actions ahead of time and right when it's needed will translate into a better outcome than sort of the status quo or the fatalistic viewpoint of, well, we were in the wrong place at the wrong time. So I encourage all of our ambassadors to think about your network and would it be advantageous for your organization if others were ambassadors as well. Think of it in those terms, and advantageous to your community. So yes, and then if you're participating in this roundtable and you're not an ambassador, think about what organization you can represent. It could be your employer. It could be your house of worship. It could be the local school. Think creatively. It could be all three. We have ambassador points of contact. Again, ambassadors are organizations and not people, but we have people who are representing multiple organizations, you know, in their life, where they're spending their time and giving of their time. So think of it in those terms and be that force multiplier. Thanks, Rich, for that.
And I've got another one here, and I don't, forgive me if you addressed this already, Doug. I was kind of going back and forth with questions.
Sure.
Jacob Soder asked, did Val mention private industry wrapping up a big project in a Weather Ready Nation bow? How would a company formally propose a collaborative project with Noaa?
There's a good question, Doug. How would we? I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time. And
That's
I
right.
realized part of the problem is you don't necessarily have a budget to do stuff with.
I don't have right. Well, we don't have a line item per se,
Right.
but Weather Ready Nation, again, it means different things to different people, but it's a large umbrella. And so whether it's the Weather Service, whether it's NOAA, whether you want to collaborate with other ambassadors, and we've had multiple success stories where, you know, NOAA and the Weather Service are the best thing that we can provide is our expertise, right? Where it doesn't cost anything to, you know, work on content generation, that type of thing. But if you and your organization have a, you know, ambitious or, you know, something that aligns with your unique talents, come to us and we can be dot connector with and matchmaker with other organizations, whether it's within NOAA, the federal government, you know, it could be FEMA. But then also we have 122 forecast offices across the country. And as a federal agency, you know, that's a source of pride that we are in all of these communities. So if it's, you know, a specific area of the country or a specific hazard, we have the experts and the contacts that we can, you know, again, be creating something bigger than ourselves.
And I will second that, Doug, just because I have on a regular basis when we're out working on these projects with recreational vehicles or manufactured housing, if there's an opportunity to bring someone from the local Weather Service office in and do glad handing and meet these people, do it. I always reach out to the local WFO, say, hey, we're in town, we're working this trade show. Would you like to, can I get you a day pass? Would you like to come out and hang out and see what's going on over here in this sector that we're trying to develop? So don't hesitate to do that. Always reach out. That's the service part of the National Weather Service. And they've always been extremely appreciative of being asked to come to those kinds of meetings. So encourage that.
And I'm also looking at Carlos and his efforts with, you know, the faith-based and spiritual community. It's, again, it's all things are local. It's getting our 122 forecast offices embracing, you know, the value that a house of worship that, you know, in a rural community where, you know, that spiritual leader, if they're behind, you know, weather resilience, then incredibly enough, you know, the congregation's behind weather resilience. And, you know, even in the pandemic world, you know, pre-pandemic, not many houses of worship would have virtual services. And now it's more ubiquitous across the country where you don't even have to go out on the road, say during winter weather. Yeah, you know, you could enjoy your service there in the comforts and safety of your home. Carlos, and any comments on that?
Well, all well said. You know, for one example I can think of here in Boulder is with the National Weather Service in Denver and Boulder. and the communication of what has happened, unfortunately, with the various wildfires that we have experienced here on a matter of a few months already. And one goal that I hope to do is, provide that information for the multi-faith organizations that exist here, the houses of worship that exist here in Boulder County, many of whom are witnessing the effects of these high impact weather events, and they want to be places of safety, volunteerism, and again, crisis management during and after these events, as well also as, before these future events, to have an implementation plan for, extreme weather events that perhaps did not exist before, or not with the frequency that exists today. And so there is a growing interest, and I would imagine this would be true across the country, of working with local weather offices here around the country to find ways that we can work together in a communal way, in a respectful way, in a reciprocated way, that again bridges both communities in the effort to build a weather-ready nation.
Great,
Doug?
thank you. Yep.
Yeah, really great conversation, and I'm very intrigued by this this idea of what a more substantive partnership might look like. And so I would just invite folks to send us their ideas. What occurs to me is it could be issue related. We've done some campaigns on specific things like heat health, for example, like with national parks, looking at making sure folks are aware of the flash flood or mud or debris flow risk, things like that. So it might be a particular interest you have in a particular issue. It might be the equity awareness that you're seeing in your community, thinking about something that happens. And one thing I want to say about the equity that I've been learning and listening to communities, one of our roundtables was in Las Vegas, and they were talking about working on heat health, and some of the solutions that community level had come up on heat health made folks more exposed to flash flood risk. So, there's compounding issues, and it's not one size fits all. So that's tricky. One thing I will mention though is I'd like to hear from folks about what Val was saying. What would be meaningful reward, if you will, award, that type of thing. We may not be able to have a financial competition type of a thing, but we do have, Noaa is working on a Noaa ambassador, kind of like distinction award for those that are really embodying the efforts of Noaa on a wide range of environmental issues. And that's a distinction that you can advertise and use, and it would have, Noaa press release and things like that. So there's those types of intangibles. I don't know if those are useful incentives or not, but I'm happy to explore some of those ideas. Thanks.
That's exactly the kind of ideas, Mary, that I was talking about. It doesn't have to be financial, but can we bring, so we've got the Recreational Vehicle Association of Texas that has bought into keeping RVs on the road safer from severe weather. Is there something that we could award to them as an attaboy that is a positive PR thing that they can display to their customers to show their engagement? And it's not money, it's intangibles, exactly what you were talking about, that you're embracing this, you're engaging with this, and you're making a difference. And we are recognizing that you're trying to make a difference. Those are the kinds of things that I have in my mind.
Great comments. And Mary, you mentioned the National Park Service, and maybe this is sort of a point to wrap up the roundtable. But in all of these examples, the RV community, the faith-based organizations and houses of worship, we're engaging people not in a very static environment, but a very dynamic environment where they're about, if you're in a national park and you're hearing about, flash flooding, heat safety, lightning safety. You're about to step into the great outdoors where that's needed. You need to plan. You need to be thinking about safety. It's not learning or engaging on weather safety in the comfort of your home where it's not necessarily sinking in or palpable. And that's where I get excited in these engagements, engaging somebody where they've just bought an RV and they're realizing, there's a higher level of preparedness that's needed, or in the houses of worship where you're listening to somebody that you absolutely trust and will go all in. That's where we're going to be making a difference. That's what I'm excited about. And Mary, any last words on your end? Not to put you on the spot, but great comments there.
Yeah, no, I've really enjoyed the conversation. I'm excited about some of these opportunities and just, so thankful to folks for the work that they're doing. So it's been great reading the chat and seeing some of these examples. And Carlos, looking forward to those sessions at next year's AMS. That's really going to be exciting to see all of these things coming together. All good. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mary. And Rich, we're good on your end?
Doug, just one last thing. I realized I didn't put my contact information in anywhere. That's my bad. So we want to throw that into the chat, if I can find the right chat box. My email is valerie@weathercall.net. That's
Great.
easy. Feel free to contact me with any questions you have whatsoever.
Great. Thank you for that. And again, this is being recorded. We're going to be working on the closed captions. And we'll be putting it on the Weather Ready Nation website. We'll be promoting on social media and through emails back to our ambassadors. So I want to echo Mary's thoughts on thank you to everyone. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to the, I think we maxed out at 210 participants in this roundtable, which is awesome. And hopefully, if everything goes well, we will be in person in Denver next January for our next Weather Ready Nation Ambassador Roundtable. Thank you, everybody, and stay safe.